Everybody. I'm just checking in, melting away here. They say, what is it? Horses sweat, men perspire, and women glow. Well, I'm glowing like a pig over here. So if I look a little wet and shiny, that would be why. It was 33 degrees Celsius today. I'm not sure what that is in Fahrenheit. I think, well, they say double it and add 32, which makes it 98. Ugh. Yeah, this is one of the main reasons that I haven't just buggered off to some hot country somewhere, because I just can't handle the heat and the bugs, right? But anyway, I wanted to maybe get you a little bit excited about Trash Tales, which is edited by our friends over at Criminolly, and the other editor's name, which I have just completely forgotten. Sorry. Just gotta look that up. Alex. I thought that's what it was, but I wasn't 100% sure. Sorry, Alex. So that's gonna be coming out, I guess, next week already, or maybe by the end of this week. And I believe some copies are available for pre-order, but I'm not 100% sure. I will put a link in the doobly-doo, and you can go in and contact Alex for that. So I'm going to read you my story because it's going to be available soon. And where did it go? Ooh. Okay, sorry. I don't mean to. All right, so this is, I think there were a few little edits to it, but not so much. If I read the original, that's going to make a huge difference. Now, and I'll talk about the impetus for the story when I'm finished reading. So this is called Mexican Mennonites, which is kind of a mouthful if you try to say it fast. Mexican Mennonites. Jack slowed down at the roundabout, barely, and pulled through, headed toward Elmira. As he crossed over Sawmill Road, he confirmed his suspicion that he'd been driving in a circle. New Jerusalem Road? Jessie craned her neck backwards, squinting at the sign. Wasn't that what Salem's Lot was called in that vampire book? That was Jerusalem's Lot, Jack corrected. We're in the right area. He didn't want to tell her he was hopelessly lost. He had no idea which of the big farm buildings belonged to Mennonites and which were regular farms or hobby farms or what. He was tired of driving and wanted to stretch his legs. His butt was starting to hurt from sitting too long, and he was starting to itch. The come-down was starting early. He clenched his teeth and gripped the steering wheel. Jessie's endless jibber-jabber was also starting to get on his nerves. The sound of her voice crawled against his skin, like a hair down his back he couldn't quite reach. He grunted when she asked a question, and he tried to tune her out, shifting his weight around as much as he could in the driver's seat. Yap, yap, yap. She really liked the sound of her own voice. They met at a party a couple of months ago, just after orientation week. She was a short brunette and cute in a birdy anorexic sort of way. Jack had fallen hard for her, and it never occurred to him how much money he spent, or how his other friends stopped talking to him. When his student loans came in, Jack prepaid the rent on his basement room through the end of December, and then blew the rest of his money on a series of weekend binges. Between lousy grades and mounting bills, Jack had been kicked out of school in mid-November, and couldn't really bring himself to care. He had sold most of his belongings, his guitar, his camera, and the telescope and books that he'd bought for his coursework in astronomy. All he had left was a dirty mattress on a remnant of shag carpet over a cement floor, and some battered furniture that belonged to the landlady. "Where are we going, anyway?" asked Jessie, interrupting his reverie. "I think I know how we can get some money," he said. "What's your landlady going to think? Should I call my dad?" "Not yet. She's probably just figuring out we took the car. Stole, more like." Jack didn't have permission to go upstairs, but when he and Jessie had snorted their last, they stumbled around and found the keys. He wasn't sure how long they'd been driving, could be hours or days, but the sun would be up soon. They had to get some more. Nothing matched the feel of the meth as it flooded his bloodstream and hit him like a speed train. The first golden hit had given way to the curve of the high a couple of hours ago, and now he was on the downside. He drew dry lips back over stained teeth and grimaced. The craving not yet a ravening beast, but it would get worse as he came down. Jessie turned her head and returned a thought and try that again. Jessie turned her head and returned a smile full of black and broken teeth of her own. The girl lived on caffeine, nicotine, and watermelon Jolly Ranchers. Jessie's hands never stopped moving. At the moment, they were twisting her in her lap, folding her skirt into an accordion, letting it drop, then picking it up and folding it again. She sat too far forward in the seat without her seatbelt. In the dim dawn light, her hands crooked into birdie claws. The skin around her cuticles was discolored with tiny black scabs and flakes of dried blood. Jack felt nervous and wondered when she would turn and hook her ragged nails into the soft flesh of his eyes. He flinched, blinked, and she was just Jessie again, nervously plucking at her clothes, her collarbones visible above the tattered collar of her t-shirt. Where are we going anyway? I thought you had that Mel guy for a connection. Jack bit back the bile. Mel paid and prodded, but the old perv was getting too demanding. He's not around this weekend. It was a lie, but Jack didn't really care what the old man was up to these days. He wasn't that desperate yet. I think this will be better. Excuse me, it's really hot out here. But there's a nice breeze, so. All right. So what are we doing out here in God's country? A flat black wagon should be passing us any minute. Hey, maybe we'll get to see some horses. Jessie loved animals. Ugh, what the hell happened there? Oops, I just closed that. Hold on. I know I'm probably not going to edit this out. Let's just do this raw, guys. That's where we're going. Mennonite country. When I was a kid, we lived in Elmira right beside a Mennonite farm. When my parents went to sell their house, the Mennonites bought it. Paid cash. I thought they took like a vow of poverty or something. No, that's Catholic priests, or maybe nuns. I don't know. Anyway, it's a big business, especially the ones from Mexico. What the fuck? Mexico? Yeah, I was reading about it, and some Mennonites went out to Alberta. Not sure why, because who the fuck wants to go to Alberta? But sometime in the early 1900s, the Mexican Mennonites called them up and told them, hey, get down here and farm for us and we'll give you land. And the Mennonites were all like, okay, and that's why there are a bunch of Mennonites in Mexico. Mexican Mennonites. Okay, I'm sorry. That to me is, like, hilarious. But anyway, Mexican Mennonites, Jessie giggled. But why would they be here and not there? That's the best part. Some of them figured they can make more money growing coke and pot, so they smuggled across the border and farm equipment. You should see the picture, like a whole bunch of combines or whatever those yellow farm thingies are, all lined up and full of dope. I would like to see that, Jessie said. Where the fuck are we? We're on Northfield, I think, as if that explained anything. So what do the Mennonites have to do with us? Even if they have money, it's probably hidden in a safe under some horse apples or something, isn't it? Jack shook his head. No, what I was going to say is that it's the perfect crime. They don't believe in banks, so they only handle cash. That's why they were able to buy my parents' house. And if you were going to go and say, give me all your money, they wouldn't do anything because they're pacifists. They wouldn't even call the cops because they don't believe in regular law or anything like that. They just step back. Jack raised his hands in a placating gesture, then put them back on the steering wheel. Jack and Jessie discussed what they would do with the money. Go to Costa Rica and teach English was Jessie's idea. Looking at the wide snow-whitened field on either side of the road, Jack could get behind living somewhere warm. After a few minutes, he saw the sign for Kitchener-Waterloo and cursed. Shit, did we just drive in a circle? Jessie sat forward. Can you sit back, please? You don't have to put on your seatbelt, but you're making me nervous. Jack looked for a place to turn around. A few hundred feet up the road, he found a driveway and made a three-point turn. On the second round, Jack found the road into Elmira. The town had grown since he was a kid. Are you even listening to me? I'm trying to concentrate on driving and you're distracting me, if that's what you mean. Jack punched on the radio and turned it up. The landlady's chosen station was the local light rock and talk. He wanted to puke. That's less of a distraction? Jessie hit the pre-programmed buttons, looking for something better. Hey, don't do that. Jack looked away from the road for a second, just a second, and felt the tires grip loosen. One hand on the steering wheel and the other on the radio, the tires sliding on a road that hadn't been well cleared. Jack's control over the car was suddenly gone. He instinctively kicked the brake pedal, trying to slow down and steer into the spin, but they were going too fast to arrest the momentum. Jessie's laugh took on an edge of hysteria, and she gripped the dashboard as the edge of the road drew closer. The bobblehead Jesus on the dash bobbed as the car's front and rear ends switched places a couple of times. Jack's heart leapt into his mouth as they sailed over the shoulder, and the front wheels landed in a ditch. Jack's teeth clicked together over his tongue, and he tasted blood. Oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck. Jessie was halfway between hysterical giggles and crying with relief. We're alive. Jack cautiously took his hands off the wheel and saw they were shaking from adrenaline. How the fuck are we going to get out of this? Jessie's voice drilled into Jack's head. He glanced in her direction. For a brief second, Jessie's face twisted in an ugly snarl, her mouth and nose forming a hook like a sharp beak about to strike. Jack blinked and jerked back, and her face rearranged into its normal shape. I don't know, just let me think a minute. Knowing it was futile, Jack threw the gear shift into reverse and rocked the car, hoping to gain enough momentum to back out. The tires spun, spitting drops of snow onto the windows, but nothing else happened. How is that supposed to help? Shut up! Jack's remaining patience was gone. If you hadn't been yapping and distracting me, this wouldn't have happened, so stuff it. Fuck you! You're the one driving. How is this my fault? I hate you! She popped the door lock and swung open the door. Her slight weight lifted out of the car, and Jack felt the vehicle shift. He grabbed the dash. Where do you think you're going? Jack yelled at Jessie's retreating form. Away from you. Her dirty Uggs sank into the snow, and she plowed through drifts, heading toward a group of farm buildings across a field. Without much choice, Jack opened the driver's door. Try that again. Without much choice, Jack opened the driver's door and slid his feet out, immediately sinking into several inches of snow. He went to the trunk and pulled out a tire iron. Then, with a last glance at the Corolla, he followed Jessie across the field. His boots were leaking. He didn't feel the cold at first, but his coat was thin, and by the time they reached the property line, Jack's teeth were chattering, jackhammering in his head, and radiating pain all the way through his jaws to his ears. He and Jessie were both wet to the knees from kicking through snow. They hopped a wooden fence designed to keep animals in rather than people out, and found themselves on a large property. A long brown barn stood in front of them. Jack could see two more metal structures, a grain silo, and off in the distance, a white house. Too cold to look for more buildings or go up to the house and ask to use the phone, he took Jessie's arm and steered her toward the front of the barn. And by the way, Mennonites do have phones if they are operating a farm business. I used to answer for the vets around Elmira, and yeah, it took a long time, but yes, they did eventually start having phones. But I mean, this is just Jack's thoughts, right? So just in case anybody wants to come at me about it. A heavy crossbeam was slid across the barn doors, but they didn't appear to be locked. Jack lifted the beam and, with a glance over his shoulder, pulled the door toward him. He and Jessie stepped inside. The warm air reeked of horses, a pungent smell of hay, manure, and saddle cream. Look for a hiding place, Jack told Jessie. Should we get out of our wet clothes first? Then what? Jack asked, puzzled. They hadn't brought a change of clothes with them. Jessie grinned and playfully tugged at the front of Jack's jeans. Jack shook his head. Not feeling it right now, babe. Besides, I think my dick's as frozen as the rest of me. In fact, the feeling in his face was starting to come back in the warmth, along with the unpleasant crawling sensation of coming down. He rubbed at his cheeks. Jessie pretended to pout. I just thought, since we're here, you could warm me up. Jack shook his head. His feet and legs itched as if his jeans had grown nettles. Surely Jessie was starting to feel this. She'd snorted before him. Better get busy if we're going to find anything. They get up with the chickens, so I'm sure someone will be coming to feed the horses soon enough. Jack turned without looking at Jessie. She followed him, complaining about thawing out and the smell of the horses. Her voice and the sounds of stamping, snorting, and jingling were getting on his last nerve. He wanted to turn around and clock Jessie a good one for getting them into this. The only thing keeping him from dumping her here and hitching back to town was the ever-shrinking possibility of a big money score. He and Jessie wandered up and down the center of the barn, looking at the horse stalls on either side. He kicked at the hay on the floor. Maybe there was a trap door or a hiding place of some kind. You're a real fucking loser, Jessie said. What is your problem? You dragged me all the way out here, and now we don't even have a way back. Oh, I'm the problem? You're the one who decided to argue with me about the stupid radio. It was lame, and you should have been paying attention to the road. I was paying attention until you got all up in my face. Jack brandished the tire iron. What are you going to do now? Hit me? Jessie shoved him. He shoved her back, and she jumped at him, her fist flying into his face. Her face reddened, and her features twisted into a monstrous apparition with sharp claws and hooked beak, trying to tear at him, trying to eat him. In his panic, he brought the tire iron down and heard a crunch that was both satisfying and terrifying. Jessie crumpled to the floor like a limp and bloody rag. Behind him, the barn door opened. Jack whirled around and whipped the tire iron behind his back, knowing he couldn't hide it. Two men stood in the doorway. Both were clad in dark coats and round felt hats. One was older and burlier with a beard, and the other younger and clean-shaven. There was a similarity in their faces. They were clearly related, although Jack didn't know or care how. "Son, what's the matter?" the elder farmer asked, his features soft with concern. "It's my friend. Jack tried to think of any excuse for why Jessie lay on the floor with blood on her face and hay in her hair. A sudden memory surfaced when he was young and attending Sunday school. They'd read passages about God, not Jesus petting the lambs or giving his sermons on the Mount, but real Old Testament Yahweh at his most wrathful. Jack had been afraid of the plagues and fires, of the sheer brutality of Sodom and Gomorrah, and the 40 days of storms. He'd always pictured God with a beard and craggy features like the man in front of him. Here was God, and Jack had to answer to him, the Father and the Son alike staring at him in judgment, and his sins, the sins of wrath and sloth, of lust and gluttony and greed, all wrapped up in Jessie's broken figure on the ground. He could hear whispering from the eaves, something ominous below the horse's snorts and mutters, and a sound of deep, heavy breathing. "Son," the older farmer asked, "Son, do you need help?" With a wail of terror and inarticulate pain, Jack shoved past the farmers and ran for his life. That's it. So I hope you enjoyed that. Hope my stumbling wasn't too distracting. I guess I don't know if anybody cares about what I wrote it about. I mean, obviously I had seen an article in the CBC or on the CBC website, and I think if you actually look up Mexican Mennonites, you'll see the article, and that is actually that is a real thing. There was a group of Mennonites who had been growing coke, pot, and I think even heroin, and they were smuggling it back in farm equipment. And it turned out that they were down there because there was some kind of land incentive from the government. And they went down there to farm the land, and it just was more lucrative to grow the cash crops, right? And I think I recall CBC actually having some kind of crime drama series about the Mennonite mob, but I never watched it. The series was after I wrote this. I wrote this story quite a few years ago, actually, and I just polished it up. I cut out about a third of just the blah 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 that happened before they got in the car. But yeah, so I had written this, and then the CBC series came out. I was like, oh. But I figure enough time's passed since since the show came out that nobody's gonna really say, "Hey, you ripped that off," because I didn't. I really didn't. And so that was one half of the inspiration, and the other half of the inspiration was my friend Gary, who that story was his. R.I.P. Gary. I hope you're resting. He told me that his parents, they lived in, I believe it was St. Jacobs, not Elmira, but it was one of the little towns just outside of Kitchener-Waterloo, where, yes, we do have a big Mennonite population. And his parents sold their house in cash to a group of Mennonites. And I always thought that would make a really interesting, because, I mean, some people might think it's a perfect crime, right? And honestly, when they were talking about making the Office spin-off The Farm, I thought it would have been really hysterical that you get a couple of idiots thinking that Dwight's a Mennonite and they should go rip him off because he's a pacifist with a bunch of cash, and hilarity would ensue, people trying to rip him off, right? But yeah, nobody listens to me. Anyway, But yeah, so the story just kind of has been floating around for some time. And then the other thing that I've always written, and this happened with last year's GARBAUGUST entry, Manhunt. A lot of crime fiction stories or series centered around criminals tries to make the criminals look really cool and edgy and smart, and they're rebellious, they live outside of the world and blah blah. But I've spent quite a bit of the last year and a half navigating the justice system, and what I've noticed is that most criminals are not just people down on their luck, but a lot of them are just the absolute dumbest fucks of Dumb-Fuckistan. Oh my. And they do dumb stuff because they're high. And when I wrote that, like even before I was having to navigate the justice system, I always kept that into perspective. My criminals are not smart. They're not edgy, rebellious heroes, anti-heroes living by their own terms. They're dumb fucks in a bad situation, and they're there because they did something stupid. And that's how I feel about criminals. And I guess it's not fair to be contemptuous of your protagonist, and I hope that you don't dislike my protagonist, because I mean, Jesse and Jack are basically a couple of really stupid kids that just got in over their heads, and it's also that whole idea of wasted potential, right? I don't know. I kind of write through a lot of that. Where was I going with that? Yeah. So anyway, that was the inspiration of it. You didn't have to listen this far, but if you enjoyed it, I'm glad. I hope you're keeping well, and GARBAUGUST is coming. There's a bunch of stuff that I've been kind of looking at that looks like a lot of fun. I have a book that is literal garbage. I'll talk about that when I start reading it. I'll have to read it with gloves on. And I'm experimenting in Canva with playing around with some thumbnails. So this will be the first of my cute thumbnails. So, give me a like if you like my thumbnail. All right. I think that's everything I wanted to talk about for now. And I hope you're reading lots of horror. Have a great day.